I stayed silent as my wife erased me. Then in court I revealed I was the legal father, took custody, and let truth decide who never left forever. Daniel was 13 the first time he dunked. He ran down the driveway, jumped off the cracked concrete, and slammed the ball through the hoop Walter had bolted to the garage 2 summers prior. The backboard shook like hell. Walter had just finished changing the oil in the truck, grease still on his knuckles. He clapped once, loud, proud, and called out, "Don't break my garage, Jordan." Daniel grinned. That was the last normal day. Walter was a quiet man. He fixed things. He never raised his voice. He worked 35 years for the state transit office, retired with a pension, and didn't owe anyone a damn cent. He wasn't flashy. He never drank much. He didn't play games. But he raised Daniel like blood. He picked him up from daycare at 4. He helped him through night terrors. He paid for braces, for football camps, for that first stolen heartbreak when some girl named Lacey told Daniel he wasn't mature enough. Walter just nodded and drove him for milkshakes. Megan had stopped coming home for dinner by then. "Work's been hell," she said. "I'm just tired of routine." He cooked anyway, chili, lasagna. He even tried that TikTok pasta crap once for them both. Most nights, her plate stayed wrapped in foil in the fridge until morning. One night, it wasn't touched at all, and neither was the bed. That particular Tuesday, Walter came home early. The living room looked off, bare shelves, no shoes by the door. The family photo from Yosemite was gone, and Megan was standing in front of the hall closet with 2 duffel bags and the kind of look you usually save for the DMV. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," she said flatly. Walter looked past her. Daniel sat on the couch, arms folded, pretending his stepfather of 13 years was invisible. ESPN droned in the background. Walter didn't speak. He just walked to the kitchen. The faucet leaked a steady bead into the sink. He tightened the handle, instinct. Then he turned and asked, "Is this about him?" Megan blinked once, didn't answer. "I've met someone else," she finally said. "We're done." That was it. No apology, no fury, no blame, just done. And Daniel didn't even stand up. He didn't say a word. He didn't meet Walter's eyes. He just scrolled on his phone like the man who taught him how to shave and showed up to every damn parent-teacher conference was nothing more than background noise. By the time the door closed behind them, Walter was already in the garage again, hands deep in the engine of the old mower. He tightened bolts that didn't need tightening because fixing things was easier than facing what he couldn't. He didn't sleep that night. He just sat in the garage watching the porch light blink out. Before we go deeper, a quick note. 98% of you reading these stories aren't subscribed. If you're one of them, I'd be honored if you hit that button. We're trying to reach our first 10,000 subscribers, and your support motivates the whole team to keep delivering these true, twisted stories that hit deep. Thanks for being here. Back to Walter. The following weeks blurred. Megan moved in with some guy named Ron, or Don, or maybe it was Rick. Walter didn't ask. He just kept doing what he'd always done, mowing the lawn, paying the insurance, fixing the dryer when it groaned. He saw Daniel once at the hardware store, buying paint. New room colors, the boy mumbled. They didn't hug. Walter didn't cry, not then, not in front of anyone. But the next morning, he dug through the safe in the back of his closet, past the birth certificates, the will, the deed to the house. He found a slim brown folder labeled in his own blocky handwriting, Daniel Adoption 2008. He didn't open it yet. He just stared at it for a long time, then slipped it back in. Because while some men roar when they're betrayed, others just wait. And Walter, he waited like a dam under pressure, quiet, heavy, and absolutely immovable. The first few weeks after Megan left were filled with what Walter called emotional muscle memory. He still bought orange juice with no pulp because Daniel hated the texture. He still left the porch light on just in case. He still checked his phone for texts that didn't come. And occasionally there were brief flashes of hope. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel texted, "Can you help with my truck? It's stalling again." Walter showed up 30 minutes later, toolbox in hand. They worked in silence, side by side. Walter adjusted the distributor cap, showed Daniel how to flush the coolant properly. For a moment, it almost felt like they'd slipped back into something normal. Daniel even cracked a joke about Walter's ancient phone. They didn't talk about Megan. They didn't talk about Rick or whatever dead-eyed clone she was nesting with now. But the next time Walter offered to come by, Daniel texted back one word, busy. After that came radio silence. Not angry, not dramatic, just absence. Like someone slowly turning down the volume on your life until it was barely audible. Then came the sidewalk. It was mid-November, wind biting. Walter was carrying a bag of groceries, beans, ground beef, and corn chips. Chilly night, even if he was the only one eating now. He turned the corner and saw them, Megan, Daniel, and Rick, or Ron, who the hell cared anymore, getting out of a car. Walter froze. Daniel didn't. The boy, young man now, taller, broader, jawline finally catching up to his voice, looked Walter in the eye and didn't blink. "You again," he muttered, then louder, like he wanted the words to stick. "You're just Mom's ex. Stay out of our life." It was sharp. Not shouted, but surgical. A scalpel, not a hammer. Designed not to provoke, but to carve right through the man who had bandaged his knees, taught him to throw a spiral, stood silently behind every science fair project, and sat in bleachers for 10 years straight, even when Daniel didn't play a single down. Walter didn't flinch. He just nodded like he was confirming the weather report. Megan opened her mouth, but Rick put a hand on her elbow and gently guided her forward. They walked past. Walter didn't turn. Instead, he drove home slowly, left the chili ingredients on the kitchen counter, walked down the hall, opened the coat closet, reached behind the winter boots, and pulled out a small silver key taped to the inside wall. It fit the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, the one with the stiff lock and the 3-digit code burned into his memory. He slid it open. There, beneath a folder marked Taxes 2004 and a half used book of stamps, sat a document encased in plastic like a relic. State of California Final Decree of Adoption, Form 230. Date, July 29, 2008. Adoptive father, Walter James Halbrook. Minor child, Daniel Marcus Lynn. Status completed and not revoked. Signed, notarized, stamped with a gold seal from the county court clerk. Still legally binding. Walter stared at it, not with nostalgia, not even with sadness, but with the same calm focus he used to fix misaligned axle shafts or shorted wiring. Something broken, now in need of repair. He slipped the file into a manila envelope, sealed it, wrote nothing on the front, then slid it into the top drawer. And for the first time in weeks, Walter slept. Rick had a drone. Of course he did. Every other weekend, Megan would post drone footage of their Sunday family hikes through overpriced vineyards or coastal trails, Daniel reluctantly trailing behind while Rick posed in his signature Patagonia vest. She captioned everything with nauseating hashtags like #bonusdadgoals and #modernfamilyvibes. Walter never commented, never liked. But sometimes, rarely, he clicked just to see if Daniel still smiled. He didn't. Megan, however, glowed. The woman who once rolled her eyes at people who overshare had become a walking rebrand. Her bio now read, Mom, marketing exec, lover of sunsets, and second chances. It was that last part that twisted the knife. Second chances, as if she'd earned them. But beneath the airbrushed brunch photos and sunset yoga, cracks were forming. The first came in the form of a voicemail. Walter wasn't supposed to hear it, but a mutual friend, Angie from Megan's old book club, left it on his machine out of what she called ethical discomfort. Angie had overheard a conversation at a wine tasting Megan dragged her to. Apparently, Megan had recently been served. Walter replayed the message twice. That night, he took out the manila envelope again, just to look. Meanwhile, Megan was spiraling. Tony, Daniel's biological father, had re-emerged like a mold bloom. No warning, no preamble, just a letter from a third-rate family law attorney stamped in crude. Client is pursuing custodial reinstatement due to prior abandonment being undocumented in court records. Visitation, if not sole custody, is requested. Tony hadn't seen Daniel since the kid was 3. And for good reason. Back then, he'd racked up 2 DUIs, fled the state, and allegedly found God somewhere in Arizona. Last known address, a P.O. box linked to a mail order, prayer ministry. But now he wanted back in. Megan panicked. She'd scrubbed her life of Tony so thoroughly she forgot the court never had. Their divorce decree listed no contact, but there was no formal custody revocation, no adoption filed under her name because Walter had handled it all. Now she was dealing with a pissed-off deadbeat with just enough legal standing to make noise and enough instability to make it dangerous. Her first mistake was underestimating him. Tony didn't want parenting time. He wanted control. He didn't care about Daniel's GPA or whether the kid liked pepperoni on his pizza. Tony cared about leverage, and Megan's curated little lifestyle, house in Santa Rosa, yoga retreats, influencer vibes, reeked of someone with assets to lose. The lawyer she hired, some desperate-looking guy named Elman, assured her that Tony had no viable case. but even weak cases cost time, energy, reputation. And with her job already on thin ice after a recent merger, Megan couldn't afford to look like a headline. Single mom's custody nightmare with ex-addict bio-dad. Daniel, of course, was livid, not because of Tony, he barely remembered the guy, but because Megan made a show of shielding him again. Another photoshopped post, protecting my son always. I'll fight for him every step, with a photo of Daniel staring blankly at his phone in the background. Walter saw it, read it twice, and then he called a number he hadn't dialed in over a decade, the county clerk's office. "Hi," he said calmly. "I need to confirm the status of an adoption record from July 2008. My name is Walter Halbrook, and I have the papers right in front of me." Court dates, Megan quickly learned, were not glamorous. They were fluorescent-lit marathons with bad coffee, jittery attorneys, and families unraveling in slow motion. Her mommy warrior aesthetic didn't land as well in Family Court Department 3B. No one cared about her Instagram, or Rick's drone footage, or the matching Patagonia windbreakers. What they did care about was documentation, and Megan, despite her sharp blazers and professional tone, lacked it. Tony showed up to the first hearing in a wrinkled button-up and Vans with the soles peeling. His lawyer was late. He smelled like nicotine and some cheap cologne you'd find in a gas station bathroom. But he brought with him a 5-page affidavit packed with technicalities, timelines, gaps, and custodial oversight. And one damning point, there was no formal court-logged termination of his parental rights. Megan tried to speak with the judge directly, something about Daniel's mental health and Tony's instability, but Elman, her half-awake attorney, waved her off. "Save it for the petition review," he mumbled while chewing an antacid. Meanwhile, Tony leaned over to Daniel in the hallway and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'll teach you to be a real man, not like the fake ones your mom keeps dragging home." Daniel clenched his jaw, said nothing, but he didn't look at Megan. Word of the mess spread fast in their old suburban circle. One of the PTA moms called Angie. Angie texted Walter. It was a Thursday afternoon. Walter was fixing a fence post in the backyard when the message buzzed in. "Thought you should know. Megan's in court. Bio-dad's trying to get custody." He stood there for a moment, holding the hammer as if someone had just pressed pause on the world. That night, he opened the manila envelope for the third time, not out of sentiment, but clarity. The name at the top, his. The signature, his. The stamp, county sealed. 12 years ago, it had been final. He didn't call Megan. Didn't text Daniel. Instead, he looked up the court docket number Angie had mentioned, found the filing location, and submitted a formal request through the clerk's office, motion to attend hearing, status, concerned third party. No drama, no theatrics, just one scanned copy of the adoption decree and a checkbox marked interested in child's welfare. Megan didn't find out until the second hearing. She was flipping through her prepared statement when Elman tapped her arm. You didn't mention there was a legal father on file." "What?" She blinked. "There isn't. Walter's just my ex. He was never a..." Elman turned the screen toward her. "Halbrook, Walter J. Legal adoption decree filed July 2008. Active status." Megan stared at it like it had crawled out of her past and into the courtroom. "Can he even do that?" she hissed. Elman shrugged. "If the decree is active, he can attend, maybe more." That day, Walter sat quietly in the back row of the courtroom, not in a suit, just a pressed shirt, jeans, and the same boots he wore every day since retirement. He didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, but Daniel saw him. And Megan, she didn't say a word because, for the first time in years, Walter wasn't someone to be ignored. He was a shadow from their past, and he had just stepped back into the ring. Tony swaggered into the third hearing like it was a custody audition, not a legal proceeding. He wore a leather jacket with a ripped cuff and jeans that looked like they'd been fished out of a donation bin. His lawyer was new, some kid straight out of night school, who mispronounced amicably during opening remarks. But Tony didn't care. He came in loud, smiling too wide, calling Daniel champ, and offering to take him to a Clippers game. Never mind the kid had worn a Warriors hoodie every winter since 8th grade. Then he locked eyes with Megan, leaned across the aisle, and stage whispered, "Bet you didn't expect me to fight back, huh?" Megan clutched her handbag like it might detonate. In court, Tony launched into a tirade about how Megan had poisoned his son's mind, how she never gave him a chance to be a father, how she was living lavishly off alimony and child support while keeping Daniel locked away from his real roots. He used words like brainwashing, manipulation, and, repeatedly, alienation. The judge, A pale woman with the patience of a lit fuse stared at Tony like he was a particularly stubborn malware pop-up. "You're claiming parental alienation," she said slowly. "Yet we have no evidence of you attempting contact between 2009 and 2023. Tony shrugged. "I didn't want to rock the boat." The judge raised an eyebrow. "But now you want primary custody." "She's unstable," he insisted, pointing at Megan. "Ask around. Look at her posts. She's parading my son around like a trophy in this fake step-forward life. Look at that guy she's with. He's trying to replace me." Megan's lawyer looked up from his notes just long enough to mutter, "Objection, hearsay." It was weak but unnecessary. The judge was already flipping through the background check. And then the real rock came to the surface. 2 active restraining orders. One from an ex-girlfriend in Reno, another from a former landlord, a history of bounced checks. A 2016 bench warrant for skipping a court-ordered parenting class in Flagstaff. Most damning of all, over $47,000 in unpaid child support, listed under Daniel Marcus Lynn, his own son. Tony tried to pivot, claimed the system lost his payments, blamed it on a scam accountant in Vegas, said his faith journey kept him off the grid for a few years. The judge asked him point blank, "Where do you live now?" "Depends," Tony replied with a smirk. "Right now, I'm crashing at a buddy's place." A silence hung thick in the room. Daniel's posture shrank by inches. He didn't speak. He barely breathed. But for the first time since this started, he turned toward Walter sitting in the back row. Just for a moment. Not pleading, not crying, just checking. Like a child checking to see if the lights are still on in the hallway. Megan felt it. She reached for Daniel's hand, but he pulled away before she could touch him. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Your Honor, I just want what's best for—" "I'm sure you do," the judge cut in, closing the folder with a quiet snap. "But so far, neither biological parent has demonstrated sufficient legal stability to support a custody modification." She paused, and the presence of a legally recognized adoptive parent in this matter complicates everything. Megan blinked. "He's not—" But the judge didn't look at her. She looked at Walter. "Mr. Halbrook, I understand you've requested observer status. Do you plan to remain passive in these proceedings?" Walter stood, no rush, no theatrics. He simply said, "I'll do what's best for the boy," and sat back down. Tony scoffed. Megan's jaw tightened, but Daniel didn't say anything. He just turned forward again and didn't look at either of them. The third day of the hearing began like the others, formality wrapped in tension. Megan wore a deep blue blazer this time, hair pinned tighter than usual, eyes darting like a poker player who kept losing hands she swore she'd win. Tony arrived 10 minutes late with a cold McMuffin and reek of sour cologne. Daniel sat next to Megan, arms folded, hoodie up, headphones shoved into his ears though nothing was playing. Walter walked in alone, same slow gait, same workman's rhythm, no briefcase, no lawyer, just a sealed manila envelope tucked neatly under his arm. He nodded to the clerk, sat in the second row this time, not the back. Close enough to hear every lie land. As the judge settled in, flipping through a binder of notes from the previous days, the bailiff stepped forward with a quiet tap on her desk. "Ma'am, received this from Mr. Halbrook this morning." The judge took it without looking up, slid a nail under the seal, pulled out 3 papers, clipped and certified with a courthouse watermark so aged it looked like a fossil. She read the first page once, blinked, read it again, slower. Megan noticed, straightened. Daniel, oblivious, scrolled on his phone. Tony muttered something crude about government dragging its feet. The judge cleared her throat. "On the record," she said slowly. "This document appears to be a finalized adoption decree dated July 29, 2008. It confirms that legal custody and parental rights for Daniel Marcus Lynn were transferred permanently to Walter James Halbrook." Silence, as in total silence. You could have heard Tony's ego deflate. Megan's eyes shot wide, mouth open mid-breath. Daniel looked up like he'd been slapped out of a trance. The judge continued, her voice clinical but cutting. "This adoption was executed legally, signed by both biological parents at the time, and never revoked or challenged. It holds precedence over biological claims unless terminated through further judicial process." She set the papers down with the weight of a gavel. Megan's voice cracked first. That can't be right. I mean, yes, we signed it years ago, but he's not involved anymore. It was symbolic. Walter was just being nice. The judge's eyes didn't move. "Legally binding symbolism," she replied. until it isn't. Tony, dumbfounded, let out a short laugh. You mean he gets a say now? The judge turned toward him, eyes sharp. Mr. Halbrook has more than a say. At this moment, he is the only party in this room with a legally unchallenged claim to custody. Walter didn't speak. He didn't gloat. He just sat, hands folded, face unreadable, like a man watching a fire burn down a house he'd already moved out of. Daniel turned in his seat, eyes locked on Walter, not angry, just hollow. You're still on the papers? He asked softly, like the question itself tasted foreign. Walter met his eyes. I never took myself off, son. Megan tried to speak again, but no one was listening. Not the judge, not the bailiff, not even Daniel. Because for the first time in 3 days, the courtroom didn't revolve around Megan's curated reality or Tony's erratic grasp at redemption. It revolved around a sealed envelope, and the quiet man who had never needed a podium to reclaim what had always been his. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly as she flipped through the second page of the adoption file, lips pressed together, tracing a paragraph with her index finger. Her robe rustled as she shifted in her chair. The court recorder stopped typing for a second, silence contagious. Then the judge looked up directly at Walter. Her voice didn't rise, didn't tremble, but the words hit like a fuse catching fire. Wait, you're the legal father. Walter didn't flinch. He didn't glance at Megan. He didn't blink, just gave a single nod, barely perceptible. The same nod he used when Daniel hit his first home run in Little League. The same nod he gave when he taught the boy how to back a trailer into a narrow driveway. The courtroom turned. All heads, Tony's, Megan's, the bailiff's, even the court clerks, swiveled toward him like they just realized the guy they'd been treating as a footnote was actually the title of the damn book. Daniel's face went white, not red with anger, not pink with embarrassment, white, like the floor just cracked under him and he was still trying to decide whether to fall or run. Megan leaned in toward her lawyer and whispered fast and frantic, There's no way that's still valid. He signed that when Daniel was 4. He hasn't acted like a father in years. That's gotta mean something, right? Right? Her lawyer didn't respond because even he had started leaning forward in his chair, scanning the document like it might rewrite itself before his eyes. The judge let the silence stretch. Then, Mr. Halbrook, can you confirm you have never rescinded this adoption nor petitioned for its reversal? Walter replied, calm as ever. Correct, Your Honor. Have you ever been informed by the court that your legal rights were nullified? No, ma'am. She turned the document sideways, then upright again. The gold seal was unbroken, county issued, certified, untouched for over a decade. Then came the shift, not in volume, but in gravity, because the judge stopped looking at Megan and Tony like they were fighting over custody. Now she looked at them like two tenants arguing about a house, only to find out neither of them held the deed. Megan stammered, He wasn't even supposed to be here. He just showed up. He hasn't been around. He hasn't... Ms. Lynn, the judge interrupted, tone clipped. It appears you've been operating under the assumption that legal parenthood requires your permission. It does not, and until this court determines otherwise, Mr. Halbrook is the only legally documented parent with an unbroken custodial claim. Tony jumped to his feet, fingers stabbing the air. This is a setup. He knew. He waited. This is some kind of revenge thing. The bailiff stepped in. Sir, sit down. Tony sat, but the damage was done. Not by his outburst, but by Walter's silence. The kind that speaks louder than shouting ever could. Daniel turned in his seat, eyes locked on Walter, not with fear, not even with hope, just realization. Because in a room full of people who had claimed to love him, fight for him, define him, only one had shown up without shouting, without demands, and without needing to be asked. Only one had held all the cards and played them with patience, not pride. The hallway emptied slowly, like air leaking from a sealed bag. Tony had vanished, probably, off to find a bar that still accepted overdraft credit cards. Megan stood alone near the payphone, staring at nothing, mascara streaked like war paint. Even her lawyer didn't linger. Daniel came out last. He looked older than he had that morning, like the weight of everything had finally landed and his spine hadn't figured out how to carry it yet. He walked past the benches where his mother used to sit during soccer games, past the doors that now locked her out of the very future she tried to curate like a Pinterest board. And then he saw Walter, still by the exit, still with no clipboard, no bags, just keys in hand and that same old expression, half patience, half quiet readiness to disappear if not wanted. Daniel's shoes squeaked as he approached. His voice cracked like dry wood. "I didn't know," he said, barely audible. "I thought you left us." Walter didn't move, didn't scold, didn't say you should have known or you didn't ask or you chose her side. He just looked at Daniel, really, looked at him, and said, "I never left. You closed the door and that was it." He turned, walked calmly to his truck, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The sound of it echoed through the nearly empty lot. The envelope with the guardianship forms sat untouched on the passenger seat, not signed, not rejected, just there. The decision wasn't final, not legally, but emotionally, Daniel knew. Megan knew. Even the judge probably knew if she replayed the scene later in her mind. They all finally saw it, undeniable, stark, permanent. The man who showed up without fanfare. The man who said nothing while everyone else screamed. The man who waited without bitterness, acted without ego, and left without asking for applause. That was the real father. And whether he signed the papers or not, the truth was already etched, deep, cold, and irreversible.